Hello, class. Hope you're having a good Monday so far. This is the class lecture for Friday. And since I have to be at a funeral today, I went ahead and recorded this. And so this is what you'll be getting today, although not as exciting and as dynamic as if we were alive together. So I'm going to finish chapter 6 today, and so the slides should now be available on your screen, but I'm finishing chapter 6, in which we were talking about public opinion. The first thing we mentioned on Wednesday was that after we realized that we all have a foundation of certain American values like liberty and equality, democracy, being a good citizen, and individual responsibility, we began talking about 3 frames of reference that we use to inform us politically. The first frame of reference we mentioned was political ideologies. The 2 main ideologies that we always hear about are liberalism and conservatism. I added a new slide that was not on Wednesday's lecture, which is a good visual aid to understanding. And so it uses a graph. You have the vertical graph, equality on one end and freedom on the other end, and then the horizontal graph, freedom on this end and order, and then you can plot these different these 4 different ideologies: liberal, conservative, we talked about libertarians, and then communitarians. This would be your getting close to your socialists. And so as you plot them on this graph, you can see liberals are strong on freedom, but also strong on equality for everybody. Conservatives, strong on freedom, but they want government to keep order. Specifically, remember, they don't want things to change that much. Conserve the old ways. And so that's a helpful little slide, I thought. Then there was all the other ideologies that I told you were possible, that were existed, but you won't have to know those for the test. So we're going to move to the second frame of reference, and that is the groups that we're a part of. The groups that we're a part of are an influence on our attitudes and ideas about government. This is all a part of that political socialization, which is a part of chapter 6, political socialization and public opinion. How do we become beings that function politically in society? How do we, how are our attitudes and ideas formed? So the second frame of reference, along with our ideologies, and usually we usually pick up whether we lean liberal or conservative, primarily from our families, and that ties in here to the groups. We are influenced by groups, and this starts very early in our life. You'll see on this slide that there are the primary agents in our life that form our political attitudes, the primary socializing agents. That is family, school, since in the first 18 years of your life, you're probably in school for 13 or 14 of them. Family, school, and then more so true in the Midwest Bible Belt, church. I might need to change that to religion. Religion/spiritual beliefs. Those are the primary agents in forming our political attitudes. And then we have the secondary specializing agents, like the media. Do you prefer CNN or Fox? Or maybe MSNBC? While it used to be that all media was supposed to just report the facts and let you decide, today's media is very biased. So thinking about a graph with liberal on one end and conservative on the other end, let's say ultra liberal and ultra conservative, you would have probably MSNBC on the ultra liberal and Fox on the well, not ultra conservative, but conservative side. There are several new ultra conservative media outlets that are on the internet, like InfoWars and things like that. So media is a secondary agent. Then our friends, and this is different than school. When we think about school, we're thinking about learning about history and government and things like that. I know you hang out with your friends at school, but your peers, your friends, are in a second category. Now, we could probably put close friends as a primary agent. Just depends on if they're opinionated about politics. But other secondary agents are leaders. This could be from any teacher in school that was a big influence on you. Maybe your high school government teacher, or your English teacher, all the way up into the president. They're secondary because unless we just listen to them night and day and read all of their stuff, they're not going to be primary. They're going to be secondary. We get influenced by them. And then there's events that are secondary influences. So all these agents input into the individual, and then with the influence of these agents, we come to have a certain level of knowledge about politics, maybe even some skills, behaviors, values. And these things are formed as these things influence us. And the result is how we vote, the opinions that we share, the political behaviors that we engage in. Now, many Americans, the only behavior that they engage in for all of their life is voting. When it's time to vote, they go and vote. But some people engage in other behaviors, going to the Capitol and meeting their senators, or writing a letter to their senator, or shooting an email to them, or trying to call them on their personal phone at the Capitol and talk to them. Some people are organizers, and then some people actually run for office. So there's a lot of political behaviors. A person who didn't have a lot of influence from these things is most likely going to stay at the bottom level behavior of voting. But these different groups are agents that form our political socialization. Then there's other groups. Gender, male and female issues in politics. Your age or the generation you fall in, like Generation X, baby boomers, millennials. Ethnicity, nationality, all of these things here are other groups that that we're a part of that can have an influence upon our political attitudes. So that was the second frame of reference, group orientation. So you got ideology. Do you lean liberal or conservative? Then the groups that you're a part of are a frame of reference. And then the third one is party identification. Political parties. Now in America, we have a two-party system, although it's not outlined in the Constitution and it's not law. That's just the way things formed. And so that's the simple version to the party identification. Most people are either a Democrat or a Republican. There are other options. You could be an independent, as you see there in the middle. You're not registered as a Democrat or a Republican. Depending upon where you live in the country, that will affect how much you get to vote. In Oklahoma, if you register as an independent, you can only vote on these state issues if there is an independent or a third party candidate running. If you just have a Republican versus a Democrat and you're registered as an independent, you're not going to be able to vote on the state level. Now that might have changed in Oklahoma. I'll have to check into that. But by the way, if as you're watching this on Monday, if you want to follow along, it's going to be pages 189 through the end of the chapter. This is the material that I'm touching on and covering. It's not going to be exactly followed it, but it goes to 220. All right, let me catch up here in the book with where I'm at. Okay. So however you register, and I'm assuming if you register as a Republican, you're going to read and seek out things from a Republican perspective. Now, the reason that the reason that party identification is not the same as ideology, remember, is because you can be a conservative when it comes to believing in freedom. I would say liberals believe in that too, but you can be a conservative in the fact that you don't want a lot of government regulation, but you can be liberal in the fact that you don't want governments to, remember this from third Wednesday, you would rather government stay out of individual liberties, such as, right, you want the government to not outlaw marijuana use. You don't want the government interfering with a woman's right to her body. So that's why ideologies and parties are different. We can, in a general sense, say Republicans are conservative, Democrats are more liberal, progressive, but they are not the only conservatives, they are not the only liberals. Kind of the big differences are small, the size of government, their view on taxes. Republicans want the government to watch out for the country and protect it. That's more important than interfering in individuals' lives. Democrats, and I'm not saying they want to interfere, but they want to make sure everybody's rights are protected. So protect individual rights and promote individual rights. Whereas Republicans would say, everybody already has the same rights. Let's protect our country. Republicans favor family values, traditional family values, one man, one woman in marriage. Democrats, instead of just limiting it to gay rights, we could say there is the LGBTQ rights. Republicans favor the Second Amendment. Democrats want more gun control. Capitalism versus environmental issues, pro-life versus pro-choice. That's kind of a general picture of the big differences between these parties. This here is a slide that specifically shows the ideologies of the two parties. This slide kind of shows a spectrum of the extreme left to the extreme right. We would say extreme right is conservatism, extreme left is liberalism. You can see that the Democrats and Republicans both kind of move more to the middle. Although Republicans lean right, Democrats lean left. The farther left you go, the more radical. The farther right you go, the more reactionary. Right? We've seen in some of the extreme news outlets on social media the reaction to the COVID vaccine. Oh, there might be a computer chip in it, or the vaccines are going to change your DNA. You know, all these conspiracy theories. That's reactionary. It's hard to get Democrats and Republicans to meet in the middle. But anyway, those are the three frames of reference for what influences individuals, citizens, and their political worldview, their political philosophy. It's your ideology, it's the groups that have influenced you, and it's the party that you identify with. And remember, there's more than two parties. There's the Green Party, the Reform Party. So there are people who are a part of the Green Party, and they lean very far left to socialism. All right, so we're going to the third main section in chapter 6 on page 201, political knowledge and changes in public opinion. And we're going to include, actually, we're going to just cover the last 3 main sections, 3, 4, and 5, which begins on 201. And they are political knowledge and changes in public opinion, public opinion and government policy, and then the 5th major point in chapter 6 is measuring public opinion from surveys. So political knowledge, government policy, and measuring public opinion. Let me get some sweet tea real quick. So you can see on the screen that the biggest factors in our political, this goes all the way back to chapter 1, our political efficacy, our political involvement, family, location, and school. So these are the 3 big factors in how we gain political knowledge and how that political knowledge will either increase or stay about the same from what we initially learned. We get our first political leanings from our family. If your parents vote, that doesn't mean you're going to automatically vote, but the level of their involvement, the way that they talk about it, will influence you. If you just simply know that when it's time to vote, your parents go and vote, but they don't talk about the issues, they don't watch debates, they don't read newspapers or online sources, most likely you're just going to be one who votes. And that's not always going to be the case. Even if your parents voted, that doesn't mean you're going to vote. Tied into that is what moral lessons you learn from your parents, from your family. And so many Oklahomans are from conservative families, religious families, Christian families specifically, and morality tends to be taught or emphasized. And some of the issues that are moral issues are issues like abortion. For conservatives, the family values, family life. And I would say it used to be gender, but I think the consensus in America is that gender issues are not moral issues anymore. But they're going to probably stay that way in religious households. And so we're going to get knowledge about those issues from our religions, from our parents, and even from our friends at school. Maybe you hang out with friends that you hang out with at your church. You guys talk about these issues. So this is more of a surface level influence. And it can be a deeper influence if you are the type of person who comes from a family that the parents talk about politics and they try to make a concerted effort to instill it into you, how important it is to be a good citizen and to vote. Did you have a church where the pastor talked about being a model citizen? The people that you hang out with, is it important to them too? Determines the depth of how much influence it has in your life. Location is not as big of a factor, but where you live tends to influence your political knowledge as well as your political involvement. Those who are in rural areas, you can see here, are more socially conservative than those in urban areas. And so your knowledge of politics is going to be influenced if you live in a rural area like we do. We're going to be more influenced by social conservative views and policies. If you live in an urban area, you're going to be exposed to more of the left-leaning, liberal, progressive types ways of looking at things politically. And then our education is a big factor in determining how much political knowledge we have. Here is the general trend. The more education a person has, the more likely they are going to, let me rephrase that. More than likely, they're going to have more knowledge about political issues, and they're going to be more active in political issues. So the more education one has, and so I believe it would hold true that people with master's and doctorate's degrees are probably percentage-wise, a higher percentage of those people are involved in politics than those who, let's say, just had a high school diploma, or those who dropped out of school. Also, those who make more money are more likely to know more about politics and be active in politics. This goes hand in hand with education, because the more education you get, the higher paying job, again, generally speaking, you're going to get. With higher education comes more occupations that have a higher status. Things like being a doctor or a lawyer. And the people who have higher occupational status are more likely to know about and be involved in politics. So your political knowledge comes from your family environment, where you live as a factor, and what degree of education you get. Many Americans don't get deeply involved in politics because for many of them, they don't have the time. They're trying to support and raise their families, and they're involved in their communities. So a lot of people just don't sit down and check out political websites or watch a lot of news or read the newspapers. Usually now, every time we have a presidential election, all of the candidates for president write a book. Most Americans don't have time to buy these books and read them. So a lot of ways that we get our knowledge are through shortcuts and cues, C-U-E-S. We skim social media, or we skim the news, skim the newspapers to try to get as much information as possible in as less time as possible. Shortcuts. Or we take our cues from other people who are more involved, like the those that are in the upper echelon of the Republican or Democrat Party. We tend to listen to them. We call them party elites. We listen to their opinion more than others. Interest groups, media. We find shortcuts in these areas and we get our cues from them. Another way that we can gain political knowledge is by skimming and scamming. This is, or scan, not scam, scanning. This is primarily with social media and online content. We can skim these resources and get our information fairly quickly, and we can pretty much find the information we want that'll help us stay within the boundaries that we have for ourselves. Most Americans don't want to listen to the other side of an issue. We have lost the ability to dialogue and discuss things. A lot of times things get emotional and turn into heated debates. If you want to be a good informed citizen, I would encourage you to listen to both sides of issues. Or if there's a third or fourth person or party, listen to each side and what they have to say. And if you want to know what Democrats in Oklahoma think, don't base it on the Democrats from Washington, D.C. A couple of years ago, we had two women running for governor, and this is when Mary Fallin became governor, and her Democratic opponent, Jerry Askins, was a pro-life Democrat. So because most of the Democrats in Washington, D.C. are pro-life, don't judge Oklahoma Democrats based on national Democrats. If you want to be really politically informed, listen to the other side of an issue. Understand the way they discuss their beliefs. Don't judge their beliefs or what you think they believe based on what their opponents say. Opponents are always going to kind of put them in a bad light. Just like I would encourage young Christians in my church as they go out into the world and they go to college, and maybe they're going to meet people from other religions for the first time, Muslims or Buddhists. Don't just listen to Christians about, oh, this is what Muslims believe, this is what Buddhists believe. Go to some Muslim and Buddhist websites. See what they have to say about their beliefs. All right. So political knowledge, that's how we gain political knowledge. Yeah, many people today, if you say, hey, voting's your civic duty, okay. He watches American Idol and he calls up, I choose the gray-headed dude. No, we're not talking about voting for game shows. We're talking about voting in the arena of politics. You need to know what you're doing. This is a poll from 2017, so 4 years ago. I'm not sure how many people they polled, but 1/3 of the people, 1 out of 3 Americans did not know any branch of the government. Only 26%, 1 out of 4, could name all 3 branches. And so if you add in the 13% who knew 2 branches, you almost have 40% of Americans who know at least 2 branches. That's kind of some encouraging news, but 1 out of 3 don't know any branch. That's kind of scary. I was going to do this quiz with you guys during class. Do you know who your senators from Oklahoma are? Do you know who your representatives are? And specifically, do you know which one of these 5 is our representative down here in Southeast Oklahoma? It's this guy here, Markwayne Mullin. All right, so this picture shows that the least educated states are basically starting in the South, going across the Midwest, then going through the Southwest up into the West Coast and Oregon. These are the least educated states. I'm surprised that California is in there, but anyway, well, this is from 2004. That might have changed. Your most educated states are up here in the Northeast, and then some in the North mid area. And then the rest of the states in purple are kind of the middle, people in between the least and most educated, middle. So you can see we are in a state that is considered one of the least educated states. Our founding fathers believed that a key to successful government, a key to successful democracy, is an educated public. The best kind of citizen is an educated one. You get the information, then using your frames of reference, your political philosophy, you make decisions on how to vote, what level of involvement you want to be in. So the more you can learn about the political arena, the more you can learn about candidates, the more you can learn about issues that you're voting for. That's good. That's what we need. On the sections beginning on page 207. And just a quick hint for your chapter's outline, the comic strip on 208 that for Instructor Bing's love is Calvin and Hobbes. But anyway, the section on 207 about public opinion and government policy, very quickly, you're not going to see this on the test, but just for you to know, the opinion that the public has on things does affect the policies that our politicians pass. But another question is, do our politicians pass policies that then affect public opinion? But, vice versa. Yes. An example I could use is a few years ago, President Obama's wife, Michelle Obama, kind of had a campaign for healthier lunches. And she really pushed that. Healthier snacks in the vending machines, which, by the way, we didn't have vending machines in our schools growing up. That's that's not right. You don't need vending machines. Use the water fountain. I'm kidding. I know there's issues of gluten and diseases. I'm kidding. It's a good thing. Just an old man rant, kind of. Anyway, yes. So her campaign for healthier food affected kind of the public that, oh, it's not good to eat unhealthy foods. Drinks that are high in sugar content and are carbonated, those aren't healthy for you. So political government policy can affect public opinion, but primarily public opinion does affect government policy. So you can have an influence. The textbook does point out that the more money you make, which goes along with your higher education, the more money you make, the more influence you have. And so in America, the more socially elite people, or I should say, the more economically elite people, those that are rich and super rich, have more influence on public policy. How do we measure public opinion? Well, we can't send a poll or a questionnaire or a survey to all 330 million Americans. So how can we get accurate public opinion? So they do polls. And usually if you have a poll that has at least 1,000 people, you can get a fairly accurate pulse on what the public is believing, what they believe and what they're feeling. At least 1,000 people. And so polls are a major way of